Okay, so we are going to talk today about podcasting to promote you, your business, and your brand. Let's see if this works. Very nice. Okay. Um, so just to give you a little bit of a track to run on so we don't get too confused and too all over the place, give you a little bit of the way I'm going to address things. We're going to talk a little bit about what podcasting is, which I'm sure most of you know what it is, and why you should care about podcasting, just another form of content marketing, and why it's becoming so popular. We're going to talk about podcast guesting, how to use podcasts as a way to promote your brand through being a guest on podcasts, and how you go out and about doing that. And then we're going to look into podcasting equipment. So even for Zoom calls, you may want to get a better microphone. You may want to get better listening devices. We'll talk about some cameras and lighting. So it's a little bit of overlap. Some podcasts are video, some podcasts are audio. We'll talk about that. Then we will get into creating your own podcast, how you might edit it, how you might promote it, how you can do it, kind of turnkey if you have the money to spend. And a little bit, people always ask me about, well, how do I monetize my podcast? And we'll talk about the realities of that, whether that's possible or not. So as we go through, Susanna, if there are questions that pop up, you can ask me along the way. We don't necessarily have to wait till the end. I'll leave it to you to decide whether it's something we should wait or something we should ask right away. Clarification,
right
maybe.
Off the bat, we're getting a request, and I agree for you to speak up a little bit louder, please.
Okay, hold on a second. Is that better for everybody? Is that
Yep,
better? Okay.
Thank you.
It's funny how you turn the dial just a little bit and it gets a lot louder. Let me turn my earphones down. I'm blasting out my ears. So what is podcasting? Everybody should, not everyone listens to podcasts, but podcasting, by the way, iPod it's not, a lot of people think it's like an Apple term and it became podcasting. Pod is an acronym, stands for play on demand. Applies to audio, applies to video. It was Apple that called it the iPod. That was really for music originally. Remember, there were no podcasts in those days. It was just music. And then it developed into podcasting where you could create something that people could play on demand and then cast it out to the world to listen to. Music, videos, audio, and so forth. So why should you care about podcasting? There are a little bit more than 800,000 podcasts now, and that's a growing list. I think the last time I looked, that adds up to something like 54 million plus episodes. There's a lot of content out there, and there's probably content in any area that you could possibly think of, any hobby, any type of business, anything that you're interested in, you probably can find a podcast about it. They don't all lend themselves to audio, but there's video podcasts as well. But the reason you should care about podcasting, just like blogging, just like social media postings, just like ebooks, just like videos, is that podcasting is kind of a way to build a relationship with your audience that's a little bit different than other things. Very few people are going to watch an hour video, but people listen to half an hour, 45-minute, hour, 2-hour podcasts all the time. They may be driving in their car to and from work, which we're going to obviously be doing less of now. But it's kind of more of an intimate relationship. You have someone in your head. They're hearing your voice. They're listening to you talk. If it's an interview format like I do, you hear them going back and forth, and they get to know you a little bit better. It's like, watching your favorite news program. You feel like you know the newscasters and things like that. So podcasting is a kind of a unique platform that kind of allows you to better communicate with your audience. If I have listeners that are going to spend 45 minutes letting me be in their head, listening to me, it certainly builds my rapport, builds my expertise, builds my relationship with that person. So that's, in my opinion, why you should care about podcasting. Doesn't mean you have to create your own podcast, but that's why you should care. So let's get into guesting. Okay. So first of all, when it comes to promoting your brand, the idea of becoming a guest on a podcast is a very good way to create content that you can post and repost and put all over the place that people can listen to, that increases your profile as an expert in the field or as a knowledgeable person in that field with very little cost. So or no cost actually. So there's no cost of advertising. There's no cost of having an email campaign to be managed or a website or anything like that. So it's and podcasts are looking for guests all the time. There's no shortage of finding podcasts. Now you're not going to get on, Joe Rogan, who just signed a $100 million deal with Spotify, but there's plenty of podcasts that you can get on, and, you know, they may have a growing list of people that follow them, but you can also promote it yourself, and people hear you on the podcast and they're impressed that you were on the podcast. So there's a couple of things I'd recommend. First of all, you could always go to the directories, Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify. By the way, Google doesn't use Google Play anymore for podcasts. They're phasing that out. So that you've got to go to Google Podcasts. It's a separate app. You can go on the web. Spotify, Stitcher, those are probably the top 4 directories. There are other directories, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, which is the Alexa app. There's a bunch of others that you can go to and search topics, search entrepreneurship, search, cat lovers, search knitting. I don't know, whatever it is that you have an expertise in, marketing, anything like that, to find podcasts. And then you got to do a little bit more research, right? So you'll have to find out who the host is, see if the podcast that's posted lists a website. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. You take the name of the podcast, put it into a Google search, see if you can find their website, and then see if you can connect with them. Put together an email, like an email kind of a bio that states your expertise and why you would be valuable as a guest to their podcast. You got to kind of sell them on that. They may want to have, like I have, a 15-minute chat with people to get to know them, to see if it's a fit for the podcast. I want it to be a fit for the podcast, and I want it to be good for the guest, because it's valuable to me if they get some mileage out of the podcast, because they're spending time with me and I'm going to be promoting it. I want them to promote it. And I want to make sure that it fits into my genre, into my, my topic. There's podcasts that lose listeners because they bring anybody on the podcast, and then the people that were listening for business purposes don't want to listen to podcasts about taking care of your pets, and you lose listeners. So you're going to want to find podcasts and connect that fit within your area of expertise. You can certainly go on LinkedIn and Facebook. You can search there if they don't have a website, or just do a general search on LinkedIn and Facebook and find out who has communities and podcasts, and you'd be surprised. I don't have a website for my podcast, for example, but I do have a LinkedIn page and a Facebook page. You can also go to podcastguests.com, right over this one over here. Everybody can see the circle that I'm making? Susanna, you can see that? Okay, good. I'm going to have to figure out how to erase that. Podcast Guests is a website where you can go and you can put up a free profile of what your expertise is, what your knowledge is. And it's a whole directory of people that are looking for guests all the time. They send out a newsletter once a week, once every other week, saying, hey, these are our new guests looking for guest appearances, and you can connect. And I've picked up a lot of guests through Podcast Guests. Steve Olsher also is a gentleman who's got a lot of videos on YouTube, and you can go to his website. He is a big promoter of podcast guesting, and he has free videos, and he probably has paid for courses to teach you how to find podcasts and become a guest on a podcast. Okay. You can also, let's see, look, I'm getting very good at this, Susanna. You also can search media hosts. I mentioned at the bottom, I don't have icons here because we're going to get into media hosts a little bit later. So I'll talk about those, but those are the websites that host the podcast. So I use a host called Podbean, Podbean, which I'll mention. There's when I get to another slide. There's Libsyn, there's Blueberry, there's a bunch of different ones that you can search for, and they also have directories of all the podcasts that are listed on their host directories. So that's another way to find podcasts. So it just takes some research to do some detective work and find the podcast that can work for you, and see how many you can get on. Okay, let me see. My page down working? Yes. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about equipment. I'm starting with microphones because I find a lot of times when I'm on a Zoom call, I'm in a networking group, that I can tell immediately who has a good mic, and it can just be a USB mic. And I'll talk about the difference in a minute, versus somebody who's just talking to the microphone in their laptop, which is where you get echoes and reverberations and things like that. Or maybe you can have a set of earbuds with little microphones. Sometimes those work, sometimes they don't, depending on the quality of them. But if you're looking to do podcasting, a lot of podcasters want you to have at least a good USB mic. These are 3 examples. I have the Samsung at home. I don't have all my podcasting equipment at home. The Samsung and USB mics connect directly from the mic to the computer, the laptop, or the desktop. So you don't need anything in between that's going to power the device, but it also gives you less control of the sound. So you don't have a mixing board, which I'm going to get into in a little bit, that I have here, where I can turn down. I think Susanna had mentioned, if I turn this down, you don't hear me as well, right? And now I turn it up, I turn up my gain, and I can control that. I can also tie in other things for doing a podcast, which I'll talk about. Two of the most popular USB mics are the two that I show you here, the Blue Yeti. Susanna, don't you have a Blue Yeti? It comes in various colors. So Susanna, hold up her mic. There you go. Whether that's like rose gold color or silver one. And it comes in many colors. Black.
It's called Cubano Gold.
There you go. So, and there's black and there's silver and there's blue and there's red. Some of them are sold out now with the pandemic, but that's a good one because it has its own volume control and other buttons. It goes for about $100, $120, I think. The Blue Snowball is another good one. It's a little bit lower price point, but the same thing. It connects in the back, and I don't think it has controls. You can control through the computer. The USB connector I have down there is the type of cord that you need. So you need the square plug goes in the back or the bottom of the microphone, and the USB then connects directly to the computer. So if you're doing a lot of Zoom calls with clients, if you want to go on podcasts, if whatever it happens to be, I would definitely invest in a good microphone. The Samsung, I believe, is a little bit lower price point, under $100. So you can look around. There are less expensive mics that may have good quality, but I'm not going to attest to them. But you can, when I got started in podcasting, we had some very inexpensive USB mics that were probably $20 or $30, and the sound was atrocious. So wouldn't recommend those. Even by the way, just as an attorney, I say I don't endorse any of these devices, so they don't pay me to say that. And if you're not happy with them, don't blame me. Susanna likes her Yeti though. So then you get into listening devices. So you could listen through your laptop, right? You can have your microphone, you listen through your laptop, which may be fine. But if you want to have more privacy in terms of what's going on, people around you, block out some sound, you can look at either headphones. Earbuds are fine. You should be able to bypass the mic if you have a mic on the earbuds, because if you're using a different mic, make sure you select the correct microphone. If you're going to do guesting and you're attending Zoom sessions and you want to make it really easy, you can look at a headset. A headset has a mic built in, comes in front of your face. I have a lot of friends that use it, and it's fine. These are $50 to $100 headsets. You can get less expensive ones on Amazon. A lot of different choices, but those are the choices. When you go to events, I would heavily recommend you at least use earbuds, because usually you get echoes between your mic and the earbuds and the speakers, and it's a mess. So I'd recommend that you at least use a listening device. If you're gonna do your own podcast, you're gonna definitely want some headphones. Then you want to get into some other things. So if you're doing just audio podcasts, it's a little difficult to do an audio podcast remotely without seeing the person. You can do it, and I've done podcasting through the phone. I'll talk to you how you tie in a phone to a mixing board in a second, but you probably want a camera. So if you have a computer that doesn't have a camera built in, or is an older laptop and has a crappy camera, these are two options. I have the one down here that's Jellycomb. I'm actually using it right now. It's a $50 camera, has a mic built in, but I'm bypassing the mic, obviously. The Logitech, I think, is also about a $50 camera. Both good cameras, both have microphones built in. The microphones tend to echo just like any other mic, so I like the other mics. The lighting, sometimes you need a ring light. If you have light above you, I have, there's fluorescent lights in here, so I don't really need a ring light. At home, I use one, but you can get a ring light. The one in the middle is a $15 light that clips on your laptop. Unfortunately, if you wear glasses, that might not work. You'll see a reflection of the ring light in your glasses. So like in my office at home, I have it stuck on the wall up above me. It still lights my face, but then you don't see it in my face. Now you could use one of these clip-on ones down here that allows you to raise it up a little bit above where you are, which could work. And that's, I think it's about a $50 unit. This is a $30 one. It has some different, softnesses and brightnesses of the light. So up to you. You can look.
I have a couple of questions here.
Yes.
Mitch. Mitch, before you
Sure.
go on. Um, so Frank is asking, what's your opinion on the Logitech Brio? I think that's when you were talking about the microphones.
I haven't had any experience with the Logitech Brio, but I can tell you that I've been happy with Logitech devices over the years. I have a trackball from Logitech. It's probably 20 years old. It still works. The camera, I know a friend who has a Logitech camera. I think my son actually uses that one too. He likes it. So I think Logitech's a reliable company. You're probably fine with the mic.
Yeah, yeah, I have a Logitech camera as well.
Okay.
Karen is asking if you speak with an accent. She was concerned that, either starting a podcast or being a guest on the podcast, I guess she was a little concerned about having an accent. I personally don't think it's a big deal, but what's your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, look, everything is a consideration, right? When I have somebody coming on the podcast, okay? So their personality is important, right? Are they going to be drab on the mic? Or are they going to sound great? So if you have an accent and you have a lot of trouble with English, it may be difficult. But if you just have an accent, I wouldn't worry too much about it. If you listen, there's an episode I did with a woman who has her own commercial cleaning company, Claudia. Forget Claudia's last name, but you look in my podcast episodes and listen to her episode. She's from Colombia. She's a pretty thick accent, and it was great. By the way, I think accents add interest to the podcast. You know, whether they're English accents or South American accents or Spanish accents or, from Asia. I have a woman, she spoke English, but she had a little bit of an accent from Singapore. The episode's coming out next week. I don't think there's any reason why you should not do podcasting because you're have an accent. If you're not comfortable speaking because of your accent, maybe you want to talk to a coach or a voice coach. As a matter of fact, the funny thing is the woman from Singapore who's coming in next week is a voice coach. She's been a voice coach for 18 years, helping people deal with their accents and speak better. And, so listen to the podcast and say what you think. Any other questions?
Catherine is asking, where can I find your podcast? Do you have
Oh,
that?
I will get to that.
Okay. Do you have your contact information and stuff at the end, or?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right.
I'll also provide these slides if everybody wants them.
Awesome.
Okay, I can save it to a PDF or something. Okay, page down. I gotta go to here, page down. Okay. So that was podcast guesting. Being a guest is great. Now, if you want to create your own podcast, there's a couple of ways you can do it. I'll give you the simplest way to do it is you can have your USB mic and you can open up Zoom and Zoom will record the podcast for you. You can even record it in separate tracks, which is maybe necessary, may not be. And then you don't need any of this stuff. You don't need a mixing board. You don't need the Rodecaster is more of an upscale mixing board made for podcasting where you can record in separate tracks. You can save it to an SD card, all that kind of stuff. But I use the Yamaha on the left is the one that I use. And it has room for 3 microphones. Now these microphones are something called XLR microphones. They use a different cable, have a little bit cleaner sound, and allow me on the board to control a lot of the sound. Okay. And I'm going to get a little bit more into that in a minute, but the microphones are a little bit different, a little bit more expensive. This is the microphone I'm talking on now, the AT 2020. It's a $120 microphone, I think. If I'm doing call-ins on a phone, the iRig is something that I use to tie in the telephone to the mixing board. And then I plug it in, gets plugged in here. And then there's an extra cord, which is this one right here that plugs into this hole, which is called the FX Send plug. Now, I don't want to get into sound engineering, but if you have somebody in your mixing board on a phone, you want them to be able to hear me and hear other people and maybe even hear the computer. But you don't want them to hear themselves because they'll hear themselves twice. It'll start echoing. So you have to minus out their voice. And one of the reasons why I like this mixing board, it's very easy, is that this whole row of buttons allows me to mix in things in and out. It's called the FX button. So if this is tied into the phone up here, up in this section right here, and I turn on, for example, I turn on the computer, they can hear the computer, but as long as their FX button is down, they don't echo. So it gets more complicated if you want to tie a phone in to the podcast. If you are, if you're doing it on Zoom, it gets a little bit more complicated. Okay, now the person can call in on Zoom. I guess you can record it that way. We're going to get into editing in a minute, but these are the kind of things. If you wanted to set up a whole mic set, even if you did it through USB, this is a kit over here. I think it's $160, $170. This is not the good mic though. I just pulled this picture for you guys to see. But if you do podcasting kit, do a search on Amazon, you'll find all kinds of stuff. This gives you everything. So you're going to want a pop screen so your spit doesn't go into the microphone and pop back, or you can use the foam cover down here. I have a one of these boom. Actually, I'm looking at it. I think it's the actual device that I'm using right now. Or you can get a mic stand, which is what I have at home. It just stands up in front of you. But if you just bought this microphone here, you need to connect it to something. It will just float in the air. It's not going to float. So you're going to have to at least get some sort of a podcasting kit, even if you're just talking through Zoom or whatever, because it's obviously you can hear my voice. It's a richer sound. It's going to sound a little bit better. Okay. Let me see. Can I get rid of this? Is there any way to do this without going? Well, we're going to page down anyway. Okay. Any other questions so far, Susanna?
Someone's asking about a mid-level setup, and I'm not sure if, and this is Frank, I'm not sure if he's referring to just getting equipment for yourself as a guest and just doing Zooms, or for going full out as a podcast host. So can you give like a very general range of like how much
cost?
should someone be someone should expect to invest?
Okay, so if you're going to go the road where you want a mixing board because you want to tie in a couple of different microphones and a cell phone, for example, you're probably looking at the Yamaha MG10XU it's been dropping in price. It's less than $250 new, maybe $210, $220. Then you're going to want to get cables to go with that, and you want to get the podcasting kit. So if you got at least a microphone and the iRig's another $50. So you're probably talking, you probably could get in under $500 all told. Okay, if you went to Amazon, you bought a package of cables, you bought a podcasting kit for $160. You got the Yamaha thing and the iRig. You don't have to use an iRig. You can just use a splitter, but the iRig tends to give you a little bit better sound. But I think you're under $500 at that point. If you're just, if you're just doing it for guesting and you want to just do it through Zoom and you're fine with that, the microphone, what did I say? Is it $120? Under $100, you probably get into a good USB mic. You'll need a cord, which is probably $20. So you're probably looking certainly under $150 just to have a mic. And I believe like the Yeti comes with a stand, right? Has its own stand. Yeah, and the Snowball has a little tripod, so you don't need, the Samsung doesn't, so you might need a mic stand for it. So Amazon's a great place for all that equipment. That's usually where you end up. Even if you go to a website, it takes you back to Amazon to buy it all there. Now, if you did it through Zoom, even, you still got to edit the podcast. You got to somehow put it together. So you could hire a company to do it. Cost you a fair amount of money, but there are companies out there that I could recommend. I could direct you to some. If I'm not going to say it here, but if anybody wants to connect with one, I connect with a few of them. One of which is going to be on my podcast soon, or you can do a search on your own that will edit the podcast, put it together, put it up on directories, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and help you with the social media marketing, all that type of stuff. There are, I'm sure, people out there that are even in schools. They're media students, and they're looking to get experience. They might be willing for a small fee to do, or maybe even just for experience, to do the editing for you, put it together for you. To check with local schools. I know people that have done that. If you really are a do-it-yourselfer and you want to learn to do it yourself, you're getting into a little bit more stuff. Okay.
Before you get into the heavy
Yes.
stuff, a couple more questions.
Yep.
Amy's asking, can podcasts be pre-recorded? And similar to that, Paul is asking, Do you record an interview with your guest and then edit it down into a 45-minute podcast? Or do you record it live and run with it as your podcast, editing out ums and curse words?
You can put curse words on your podcast. It's not live radio. I don't do live podcasting. Some people do. Most of the time they're pre-recorded and then uploaded, because all of my podcasts I edit. I clean up the sound. I edit an opening because I have some sponsors. We're going to talk about monetizing at the end here. And so I have an opening. I have a, this episode of The Accidental Entrepreneur is brought to you by, Kellogg's Corn Flakes. That's not one of the sponsors, and then it goes into, I use a format where I take a hook, which is like a piece from the podcast, and I put it at the beginning, then it goes into the opening, and then a little intro by the person, and then it goes in the podcast. So I don't do them live, but some people do them live. There's an internet radio station called talkradio.nyc. It's a local radio, and you literally can hire them to do a podcast for you. It's a couple $100 a week. If you liked your topic, he will help you develop it, do it, promote it. You go live, I don't know, every Wednesday. I don't know what the date is. You go live, and then they re-record it and repost it and repurpose it for you. If you have a good idea, I can introduce you to Sam. He doesn't take everybody on, but you're paying to be on there, so that's fine. It's only a few $100s a week, but so that I hope that answers the question. So generally, most podcasts are pre-recorded. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll put the video up on YouTube, and maybe they'll stream live for the video and then post it after that. But generally, the podcasts themselves, because they have openings and closings and music and so forth, are edited. You can use certain kinds of software. Adobe Audition is a paid software. This particular software, Audacity, is free. I use it to do all the podcasting editing. So you can download it. Just do a search for Audacity and download it to your computer. There is a little bit of a trick, not a trick, but a little nuance. If you are using Zoom to record a podcast, Zoom saves the audio file as, I believe, hold on a second. Can I jump out of here? Yeah.
I think it's a MP4A.
Yes, thank you. An MP4A. Play from the current slide. There we go. An MP4A cannot be imported into this free software. So you have to go on the web, and there are free converters that will convert. Just do a search, converting what did we say it was? An M4A file to an MP3 file, which you can import. That's why I'm saying it gets complicated. You want to do your own podcast, which you can import to this software. Okay. Now, maybe Adobe Audition, you can import it directly. I don't know. So there is a little nuance there. There are also ways to kind of boost the sound and clean up the audio once you've compiled the whole podcast. And there's some things you're going to want to watch some tutorials about Audacity within Audacity and also on YouTube to learn about some of the things you can do to clean up sound and special effects and how to fade in and fade out and all that kind of stuff. So there's a little bit of a learning curve that you're going to learn what all these, can you see the pen that I move around the annotation, or only when I draw? You can see the pen? No, just when I draw, right? Okay. So this, you got to learn what all these buttons do. Some of them allow you to shift the blocks of sound. Some of them allow you to cut things. The recording, you change the mic. There's things over here that have to do with the particular tracks and what you can do with that. You can put them in different orders. You can split them. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do with the software, but it's certainly something that you have to learn to deal with. There's a host, this one over here called Anchor. It says the easiest way to make a podcast ever. You actually can download the Anchor app to your phone, call somebody on the phone, and record your podcast right into Anchor, and then do your editing in Anchor. Now, I'm not that familiar with Anchor, but I do have a friend who's got a podcast, and they do it all through Anchor. I think there's a free version of it, but after you get going, you have a lot of episodes. There's a paid version. You can look into Anchor, anchor.com, I think. And that's a shortcut way to do a basic podcast. And they'll help you get it up into the directories and so forth. I use Podbean. There's a free version to start, and it allows me to put show notes. And I like the control of being able to put show notes with links and and schedule when it's going to be released and the whole thing. Because you can literally schedule out all your podcasts on Podbean. Even the paid version, I think, is $8 a month or $10 a month. Allows me to put more show notes and have a few more features. Podbean, Blurry over here, Libsyn, any of the others, they all will allow you to easily post up to the directories, which I have here on the right: Apple Podcasts, Google, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, and TuneIn. These are the 5 that I'm on. There are some other directories, but those are the main ones. And right from the host, they should post it right to the directory. There's some setup involved, but once you're set up, every time you post a new episode to your host, it'll go right onto the directories. So when I load up next week's episode, it'll launch whenever I tell it to launch. So once it's available on the host, it'll also be available on Google, Apple. And since I subscribe to my own podcast, I get notified when there's new episodes. So please subscribe. I need more subscribers. You can find me on all the directories. Any other questions so far? No?
So Alexander says that Handsbrake can convert. Sounds like
okay, good. So there's a piece of software, Handsbrake. So yeah, I'm an attorney, not a software and not a sound engineer, but yeah, I'm sure there are softwares that'll convert. And he's meaning converting the M4A file to MP3. Is that what he means?
I don't know.
Let's see what he says. I think the one I use is called Cloud Convert. Let me see. Let's see. Social media, podcasting. Here we go. Yeah, Cloud Convert is the software that I use. The free website that I use. The chat's blinking again. Is there a question? No? Okay. Stop me if you...
Yeah, it says free to convert MP4A.
Okay, yeah. So it's the same thing as Cloud Convert. It's free. Then you download the files and you can load them up into the Audacity. The one thing about Audacity, which probably is not true about Audition, is that it's because of the way it saves the files, it's very hard to put it up in the cloud and to run it from different locations. If you use your laptop at home and you use your desktop computer at the office, once it's a converted file to MP3 for uploading, I can move it anywhere I want. But while it's an Audacity file, I can't work on it through the cloud. There's too many separate files that it uses and folders that it sets up, data stuff, because it's free. I don't know. If anybody has any questions about any of this stuff offline, you can always send me an email. So I'll tell you how to get in touch with me in a minute. Okay. So this is my cover art. I made that on Canva, by the way. That's another thing you got to do. You got to make some cover art to promote your podcast. So Canva is a free website. It's a very good website. I know Susanna knows it. To create art, if you have a friend who's a graphic designer, they can help you too. Shows my, let me do this down here. It shows the accidentalentrepreneur.podbean.com is my host website through Podbean. And you can just search Accidental Entrepreneur in the directories. You can find me that way too. So monetizing. So it's very hard to monetize a podcast. If you're starting a podcast and you'd like to make money doing it, I wouldn't make that your primary goal. There are 800,000 podcasts, and I bet you probably less than 1% of them monetize significantly. But one thing you could do, and this is the road that I've been going down lately, is to form relationships, affiliate relationships with services that might be valuable to your listenership, where every time somebody purchases that product or signs up for that service, that they pay you. And over time, you might be able to build up some income and use it to hire a company to do your production, hire a company to help you with the social media postings or things like that, or hire somebody to find you guests, whatever it happens to be. So I'm a big advocate of affiliate relationships. I have 3 affiliate relationships we've just formed that are launching in July. And so every time, if you ever sign up for their service, use their services, if you do it through our landing pages, we would make a little bit of money. It's not a ton of money, but it starts to build things. So that's probably the best way to go once you have some episodes. If you got 4 or 5 episodes, you're probably not going to get anybody anyway. But once you reach 30, 50, 100 episodes, you've had several thousand downloads, you can start to monetize. Now, there's a website, I should have put a link to it, the logo, called Podcorn, Podcorn. It's a website for sponsorships. So if you have hundreds of followers, thousands of followers, that's where you can start posting things and say, offer 30-second mid-roll commercials for $150 an episode or something, and start to get people that are looking, because there are companies that as part of their budget look to post commercials on podcasts, on business podcasts, on, podcasts that support whatever it is that they sell and do. And they're out there looking for things. They're looking for, to do a podcast about their product, a whole episode, and they'll pay for it. They're looking to be on multiple episodes, and you can sell a package of 4 or 6 episodes. So you can check out that website too. Any other questions? I still see the chat blinking.
No, I was just, I was typing in there. People were asking about Canva, and I also typed in the
Podcorn. Yeah. Okay. So just to let you guys know, so this is the best way to get in touch with me. You could always go to beinhakerlaw.com, which is my website. I mentioned to you the Accidental Entrepreneur is available on LinkedIn and on Facebook, so you can always interact with me there. Below here, this is my Linktree link, and that is Linktree is actually a good service. This is the free version, and you can literally list all of your contact information. My calendar's on there, my website, all of my social media accounts, both for the podcast and for my legal practice, because I'm a business attorney in New Jersey. And that's a good way to interact with me. So I'm always available for email, and email is the best way to get a hold of me, because I'm on a lot of Zoom calls, as everyone knows, and sometimes it takes me a while to get back to you if you leave me a message. So I could text you or email you while I'm on another call if you have questions. Are there any more questions?
While I'm letting people have a minute to type in their questions, so as someone who runs a podcast, what are you looking for in a guest? How do we know if we would make a good guest?
Well, the first thing is that whatever you do fits within the category of the particular podcast. So my podcast is an entrepreneur's podcast, and I look for people that are entrepreneurs, inventors. I'll talk to social media influencers if they work in the small business space, business consultants, business coaches, really anybody that services small businesses. I like to talk to, even marketing professionals if they work with, the kind of small businesses that I work with. I work with local businesses. I work with, my listeners are, restaurants and gyms and consultants and all kinds of people like that. I don't know if I have executives that listen with bigger businesses, maybe, but that's basically my target audience. So you kind of have to research the podcast a little bit, see what they write, what the write-up is and what they talk about, look at their episodes, see the kind of guests they've had on in the past, and, tailor your pitch to it's going to interest them in having you on the podcast.
So a question from Tony, does Mitch have any recommendations on brands to use for podcasting kits?
I don't. I do have recommendations on microphones. So I like the Audio Technica microphones, the AT2020, which is the one I showed. Hold on a second. Let me see. The one I showed here. The one down here. I think I can look at that, right? Current slide. Okay. I like the Audio Technica AT2020. The newer ones, the 2035, and I think there's a 2025 or something. They're good microphones. They're solid, well built. I don't know if anybody has any problems with them. But if you're spending, I wouldn't get anything under $50 because I think you're really buying something cheap, maybe from overseas. But if you're probably at the 75 plus range, you're probably okay with any of the microphones that you get that are solid in terms of that. But that's I'm just telling my experience. I don't really recommend any brands. These are the ones that I'm using. Don't buy a kit with a microphone. You never heard of the microphone and the whole kit's $79. It can't be that cheap because the equipment themselves without the microphone, should be that much money. If you're going with a USB mic, make sure it'll fit in your podcasting kit, whatever you're getting. And if you don't really need if you have a Yeti or a Snowball, you don't really need a podcasting kit because it has a stand. If you're going with the Samsung you're going to want some sort of a boom mic or a stand or something to hold it. And then you're going to want, if you look at the podcasting kit, this thing right here is called a shock mount, and it limits any vibrations, the mic, if you talk. I don't know if that's that big of a deal. I have a shock mount right here. But every once in a while you move your arm and you hit the microphone. I don't know if anybody heard that, but it's because there's a shock mount. So that's kind of what comes with the kits. But as long as you're careful, like Susanna doesn't knock over her Yeti mic, I won't make any noise. Exactly. Other questions?
Oh yes.
Okay, good.
So I missed this one earlier. How does the mixer handle voice over IP incoming calls? It sounds like a really technical question.
It's not that technical. If your voice over IP is coming in, if you're coming into a voice over IP phone, right, you're going to need some sort, and I can't tell you what that is, but you're going to need some sort of a connector that's going to allow you to plug the phone in to the mixing board. It may be some sort of an RCA jack. So, for example, I have a USB phone in the office. And I'm looking at it, if everybody can still hear me, and I'm looking at it, and it has a headphone jack. So I probably could get a, let's go over here, right, on the iRig. I probably could get cables, forget about the iRig part. Let's forget about the iRig. I probably could get cables. The phone would probably give me a 3.5 millimeter jack. And the mixing board's going to need a bigger jack. I think that's 6 1/4. And you can get a cable on Amazon, of course, that has one little jack and 2 big jacks. And then that you should be able to plug it into your mixing board. Now, the quality of it's going to depend on your internet connection, not the mixing board. So that's my best guess at what you need to do. I've never tested that, by the way.
So Amy asked, what do you recommend what I need to go when I need to go out of state to interview?
What do you mean need?
I guess what equipment do you, if you were to like go somewhere,
like you're traveling,
and how do you record an interview? These questions are getting intense.
Yeah, well, I don't know how you're traveling now. I don't travel for podcasting. I do it on Zoom. I do a Zoom call with them. I have Zoom save the audio. I download the audio and then I convert it and I go into Audacity and I do the editing. I'm still using my mixing board and the other pieces in my office, but they're on a mic remotely. If I had to travel, I mean, I have some computer bags and all, the Yamaha over here, you can't see it, but well, actually you probably could see it, is, hold on a second. I have to turn off my background. Let me see. Don't anybody tell anybody that I'm not in a nice office, okay? So there, everybody can see the mixing board. It's a small device. So it's easy to pack up and take with you and load up your cables and all that kind of stuff. My screen's going to be shaking for a little while because I'm putting the mic back there. Okay. So that is, here's my background. So if you're traveling, you can pack up your equipment, take it anywhere. I mean, it's the boom will fold and the mics get packed away. But I like Zoom if somebody's remote. Obviously I had someone in Australia. I'm not traveling to Australia or Vancouver or London. We did it via Zoom. It was fine.
Cool. More questions. What is the money range of a sponsorship on Podcorn?
You pick that. I think there's some things you can look at in terms of what they recommend, but you can pick that. You can offer up and say, listen, we have a 4-episode package and it's, $150 an episode, $50 an episode. You don't really know what they're looking for. They will list their budget as to what they're looking to spend overall. So you don't want to tell them it's $5,000 an episode. You got 4 listeners and their budget's $400. So, you want to tailor it based on the amount of listeners you have. Obviously, the lower it is, the more, you don't want it too low because then they're like, well, why should we do this anyway? And you want to make sure you have enough listeners for them to say, okay, well, they're going to look at your downloads. They're going to look at, how many, they're going to ask you that. How many downloads do you get? How many listeners do you have? And then they'll value whether spending $100, $150 an episode makes sense. I wouldn't be putting it up for a couple thousand. you had 1,000 followers, you could, but not until you really build up the following of the podcast.
Okay, so somebody named Mark Picard is asking.
Oh, we don't answer questions from Mark
I
Picard.
know. How does someone become a guest on The Accidental Entrepreneur?
So I take my guests based on, recommendations. I get approached by people all the time. You can send me a resume if you are somebody who works in the small business space and you're looking to get on the podcast. Send me a resume. We'll set up a 15-minute chat on Zoom, meet each other, make sure it's good for you, it's good for me. It won't come out probably till the end of the year because I'm already booked through into November with episodes that I still need to edit, but they will be out. And if that works for you, great. If you just want to meet with me and talk about podcasts, I'm happy to do that too. But that's how you get, but no recommendations from Mark. So, that won't help you get on the podcast.
So we have a really great question. How often do your guests attract new clients from being a guest on your podcast?
That's a good question. Somebody asked me that recently. I mean, one of the reasons I started the podcast was just for that reason, was because as a lawyer, it's you don't just I don't do work for Susanna and then say, oh, who are your 10 friends who own businesses and I can call on all of them. It's not really ethical from an attorney standpoint. If Susanna had a friend and she got permission for me to call them and I called them and they had a legal issue, great. So I use it as a marketing tool to approach business owners. I have probably at least, I don't know, half a dozen or a dozen clients that came through the podcast. I mean, I've been doing this for 2 years. It didn't really pick up until this past fall because it takes a while to get momentum. And then we hit coronavirus, so that didn't help. But I'll tell you one thing. I've grown my network, probably tripled my network. If I had, 1,500 to 2,000 people in my network that I was in regular contact with, it's probably 5,000 or 6,000 now because of the podcast, because I've met people all over the world and have, done episodes with people that have big followings on YouTube and Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook and stuff like that. So, but it definitely allows me to approach people and it's definitely brought me business.
Okay. So, I'm looking at a question. I'm not sure what that question is about. So, maybe you do. It's from Morali, and it says, these are all technical issues. How important is this relative to the content of the podcast? One person or more than one person, once and done, or a series, and how to build up the following?
Do you think the question gets to like the format of the podcast, whether it's something you talk or interview? Is that what he's asking?
I don't know. I just read you what I have. So,
well, I'll ask it the way we think it is. Okay. I do an interview. I do a long form interview. I like interviewing people. It's easy for me. I don't have to really prepare anything. I think people are interesting. I like their stories. That's part of the interview process. When I meet somebody, I like them to have a compelling story that I think will sell well and people want to hear and they'll be motivated by. Some podcasts are really just people. I talked to a guy this morning who's coming on my podcast. He's has his own book and he's a motivational speaker and he deals with stuff for business owners. And he's coming out with a series of, well, it's part of his book. He's basically, summarizing his book and he's doing a 8 or 10 series of him talking into the mic about topics. When I first started, I was talking about legal topics. And then I decided, because a friend told me that that's very boring and nobody wants to listen to that. So then I invited a friend of mine to sit down and do an interview. And it went very well. And I felt very comfortable doing an interview and it was very compelling. And then I created the name and we stuck with it that way. So was that the question he was asking? Like, how many mics do you need? I mean, it depends on how many people you're gonna have on the podcast. There's people that have two hosts with a guest and the hosts are local and the guests are remote, although they're probably all remote now because of coronavirus.
So there, I'll follow up to that from Raleigh, quoting, so there's a show called Make Me Smart, and they have, so Make Me Smart has Kaya and Molly versus an interviewer and a guest.
Okay.
So, and then.
Yeah, I mean, look, the sky's the limit as to how you want to design the podcast, whether you want, to have, I mean, there's a podcast, it's really a YouTube channel where the guests come on, they eat hot wings and then the guy interviews them. And then by the end of the thing, they can't speak. I mean, there's all kinds of different formats you can do. My friend does it on Anchor, it's called C3 Chat. And his Sid and Eric, they do this, and they do it on careers and kids coming out of college, all kinds of different things. Theirs is like 12 minutes, 18 minutes. It's just the two of them. Now they're starting to bring guests on. It's a short form type of a thing. And they're asking questions and doing all kinds of stuff. I've been on podcasts where I've been sent, I was telling somebody earlier, where I was sent a canned list of questions. I don't recommend you do a podcast this way, but I was sent a canned list of questions. And stupid me, I'm like, oh, they sent me some questions that they might ask me. That's so nice. I get on the podcast, and the person literally, and I think he was nearsighted, he literally like takes up, and you could hear the things rustle, and he's like, so Mitch, and he starts reading this thing, and I realized, oh my goodness, he's going to read every one of these questions, and I need to be prepared with something. I hadn't prepared anything, so I made it up as we went along. People were like, oh, it was a great podcast. I didn't think so, but you know, everything's the eyes in the beholder, it's in the ears beholder, I guess. But yeah, I like doing things that are more natural, more conversational, and not off the cuff necessarily, but you know, because that can lead to disaster. But you know, I don't prepare for podcasts. I mean, I just have a bio. I want to know what your background is, and I'll take you through your life, and I want to hear your stories, and I'll interrupt you and tell you to go over that, or wow, how'd you do that type of a thing. And that, you know, that's what I like to do. But yeah, there's all kinds of different ways you can think it, you can do it. You may need a bigger mixing board. I don't know how many people you're going to have on this thing, but that's up to you.
So I don't see any more new questions right now, but I have a kind of a question / comment. I hear from people all the time saying, "Oh, I think I'm going to start a podcast," and
yeah.
You know, I know when someone says, "I think I'm going to start this," they may not realize that this is a huge undertaking. And if you're planning to, I mean, you make it sound easy because it
took me 8 months to figure it all out, and some of it I'm still figuring out.
And some people are thinking, well, I'm running an entire company, and oh, I'm also going to start a podcast. You know, if somebody were to do, you know, how often should they consider launching a new episode?
Right.
How consistent does it need to be? And also just put some words around the fact that you can't just think about this lightly, like I'm going to do 2 or 3, get bored and walk away.
Right. Well, I mean, there are podcasts that have come out on topics where it was 7 episodes and that was it. It was like an article, and that was it. That was the end of the podcast. It doesn't have to be an ongoing thing. I will say this, and this is my own personal belief. If you should like whatever you're putting out, right? Whatever your content marketing arrangement is. You like to write, you like to do blogging articles, ebooks, great, write it. You like doing video, you want to do video clips. I wouldn't do an hour video, nobody's going to watch it, but you know, segments, tips, whatever it is that you do, and it's very visual, great, do videos, and you can get equipment, you can learn about that and look at, but it's still a learning curve, just like the podcast. If you like doing podcasting, great. Now, there are services. If you're an executive and you say, you know, I want to do a podcast because it'll promote our business. There are companies where literally you can pay them a fee and they will call you up. They'll Zoom with you and say, and I'm the host from the company. Susanna, it's so good to see you today on the podcast. Thanks for coming on. And today we're talking about, you know, cats that get stuck in trees, and, you know, and they'll run the whole thing, record it, put it, and you don't do anything. You're just the guest basically of your own podcast. It's not free. But I know a lot of financial advisors who do that. 2 reasons. One is that they're busy, and 2 is that their compliance is such that the company might say, listen, if you want to do a podcast, you got to do it through this service. So there are companies that do that. There are companies that you can record the whole thing yourself and then download it to the company. They'll do all the editing and the promotion and all that kind of stuff. So there doesn't have to be a learning curve. I mean, I think you want to know what your parameters are and things you can do. But if you have money and you're not on a tight budget, there are ways to get around that. But either way, you have to be, committed. I would say if you're going to build a podcast and you want to build a following, you should at least be, it doesn't have to be every week, but it should be consistent, right? The first Tuesday of every month, you put out an episode. And you might find out, though, you're not getting a lot of play because a month is a long time where things happen. Now, if you're writing your own content, you might need a month just to come up with the content. I've been doing a lot of interviews that have gotten busier and busier and busier, and I've gotten to the point where I have my little clips and I can throw them into the editor. It doesn't take me forever. I'm going in July to a twice a week platform, and I'm still booked out to October, November. So we're coming out on Tuesdays and Fridays. There may be some special episodes here and there, but for the most part, and with the podcasting hosts, I can schedule all that stuff out. I can schedule the social media posts. I can schedule the emails. I can schedule the podcast, the uploads of the episodes, the release of the episodes all ahead of time. I even schedule through Google. I even schedule a reminder email that tells you how to do it. I send you a white sheet that tells you how to promote it, follow me, all the kind of stuff. But that also took, time. I had to produce the content. I had to make the artwork. I had to, script out the commercials. Now is the next thing I'm doing. I'm writing commercials for people to, now you can, sure. Someday I hope I have a virtual assistant that does all this stuff, but I don't. My practice is busy, but I'm not looking to put a lot of money into the podcast until it starts to really bring in a lot of business. And I enjoy doing, I enjoy doing the editing and all the learning that stuff. If you don't, then find another way to do it or don't do podcasting. It's just my 2 cents.
That was awesome.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
I don't see any more questions.
If you want, I can, let me see. I can download this. You know what I'll do? I'll stop sharing my screen. I can download the episode the slides to a PDF. And I think, can I upload that in the chat? I think I can, right?
You know what? Just send it to me because I'm gonna email it out to the webinar attendees. So, just send that to me and I'll push it out. Someone asked, can you please mention the New York City podcast again?
It's called
was it like talk something?
Talkradio.nyc. That's what it was. Talkradio.nyc. .com.nyc.
And I have another question. Someone asked, what are 3 do's and don'ts? What not to do?
Do's and don'ts. Well, don't do podcasting topics outside of what your podcast is promoted as. You'll lose listeners. So if you're going to do it on just because you think your friend's nice and they have some cool hobby and it's got nothing to do with the topic of your podcast, I wouldn't do that. Also, don't be totally haphazard with your, if you want to build a following of listeners, you should be consistent with your release of your episodes in terms of the day of the week or the time of the month, whatever, in terms of where you're listening, so that people get in the habit of, it doesn't happen. I don't think anybody knows when mine are coming out, but they get into the habit of knowing they come out every Friday. And I've started announcing that starting in July, it's going to be Tuesdays and Fridays. Now, I'm sure there's going to be people that unsubscribe because they're going to be like, oh, this is too much. Or they don't listen, but they get my emails and they're going to say, oh, it's too many emails, and they're going to unsubscribe from the email list. But, I have a lot of content, and I think content marketing is good, and I think it makes you relevant. So those are the 2 things. I don't know what the third one is. If I think of something else, I'll mention it to you. Susanna, I'm sending you the slides right now.
Okay. Amy's asking, what's the best length? I guess the best length of a show.
I don't think I have the answer to that because it depends on what you're doing. I find that if you're doing an interview style podcast, you could go longer. I've gone anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes. If you, here's the slides. If you listen to, some of the other ones, like one of the really good business ones is How I Built This with Guy Raz from NPR. Business Wars. Well, Business Wars is a little bit shorter, but they're about an hour each. Even Joe Rogan, he goes 2 hours some odd with these people that he's interviewing. You can get away with longer because I think, you get into people's heads longer. I think it's a good way to build relationships. If you are talking, just you, personally, I find it hard to listen to one person about a topic for 45 minutes to an hour. I'm better off with an audiobook. I'd rather listen to, which kind of is like a podcast, from chapter to chapter. But, that's what. Now, if you're doing a podcast and you don't have guests, maybe it's a good idea to have a co-host with you and do topics together. Then it's back and forth. I think you want to make it interesting. Remember, you're not a famous person. Maybe there are some famous people listening, but I'm not a famous person. So for people to hear me, hopefully they like my voice, but to hear me, just me, I think is boring. So I'm going to do things to make it more interesting, where I can have somebody on and they're going to say something, I can laugh, or I can make a joke, or we can be light about something, or be serious about a topic and share thoughts and stories, and, makes for interesting content. So that's going to affect how long your episodes can get away with. So, even my first episode, if you look back, there was a gentleman named Jack Killian I interviewed, 78 years old. He's been a friend of mine for 15 years. I didn't know what to do with the podcast. So I said, Jack, come on, I'm going to interview you for the podcast. First thing he said was, well, what's a podcast? And then he came to my office. We spent 2.5 hours together. Now I edited it down to about 2 hours. At that point, I had a lot of problems with the audio because we had older equipment. So it got down to 2 hours, but I felt that was too long. So I did it in two episodes, and they're an hour each. So I hope that answers the question.
Cool. Is there an easy way to create a transcript for a podcast after it's recorded or even live? Any options?
Yes and no. There are websites. I use one called Temi, Temi, where it's a few pennies a minute, maybe 10 cents a minute. There's some out there that are 25 cents a minute, goes by the time. They'll transcribe the episodes, but you can't just post them. I mean, they have to be cleaned up because the transcription software isn't perfect. Somebody asked about accents before. Transcription service is going to have a tough time with accents. And you're going to have to go through it and listen. You run the podcast and it'll run on their website, and, follow the words, and you can stop and change it. But, if you have an hour podcast and you're editing the script, it's going to take you more than an hour. It's probably going to take you 3 or 4 hours to edit the script. But yeah, I mean, I tell people that if they want the transcript, I'll do it. The fee is nominal, but then they'll have to clean it up if they want to repurpose it for a blog article or something like that. People keep telling me, oh, you should post the transcript. It's good Google content. I don't have the time to clean it up, and I'm not putting it up, wrong. So that's the transcript answer. Any legal forms need to be created for the interview. I don't have any legal forms for people to sign. I don't think that I really haven't found any need for that. We're just talking. If they don't like the episode, I give it to them before. They can take it down. They approve the show notes. I don't think there's any issue. Something came up, it hasn't happened, but if something came up in an interview that was offensive to me, or I felt was offensive to other people, I probably wouldn't put the episode out. That's the advantage of not going live. But no, I wouldn't say there's any legal forms at this point to be created. If you were at a studio and you had people come to the studio, and maybe there's a reason, but I don't think so. You have the control, so you could always beep out bad words if you want to,
Thank you, Mitch. This is absolutely awesome, and we're gonna. We have the recording. I'm gonna figure out how to get the recording out there. We may just do a YouTube channel for the SCORE chapter and post it there.
Sure.
I definitely will push the presentation slides out to everyone.
Yeah, everybody go to my host site and subscribe to the podcast. Then you'll get notices every time there's an episode uploaded, and you'll see what I'm doing. And I appreciate the support.
Great. Thank you so much. And Marty, you want to close this out?
I'll close it out. Thanks, Mitch. Great. A lot of great information. Thank you very much. Again, if you like to make an appointment, please go to our website. Very easy to find a mentor, and we'd love to help you out. And thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.